Yes, and then in the distance I heard the bulls. I began running as fast as I could. Fortunately, I was wearing my Italian Capto Oxfords. Sophisticated yet different. Very much like Jeff Rimmer and Randy Raines. The world's seventh most interesting broadcast. Milkshake. Listen to it, or be damned.
Milkshake. Milkshake. Milkshake.
Milkshake number 8. Thank you, Jay Peterman or John O'Hurley, whichever one you want to say. Appreciate the intro, man.
That might be our best intro ever. Love the fact that anyone from Seinfeld will reach out to us and say hello and welcome the show out there. So love hearing his voice. Loved his character on Seinfeld. So it's a great way to start.
Yeah, I'm excited to get him on as a special guest. I kind of worry about doing that because his voice is so great that it puts us to shame and no one will want to listen to us anymore. But that's who's listening to us to begin with.
Well, it's like people listening to us. They hear your good voice and then they have to deal with mine between your speaking. So imagine what they go through with me.
I don't know. I don't agree with that. When I listen back to this, and I do a lot, like in the shower, when I'm working out, which is not usual, and also in the car, and I listen to Milkshake a lot just for entertainment purposes. And you sound like Casey Kasem, and everyone loved Casey Kasem.
Oh man, I've downloaded the show 1,000 times just so we can get our sponsorships going, and I still sound bad every time.
I think the sponsor this week is the new podcast that I'm working on, that I'm launching later this week. That's the sponsor of this one, and then I'll sponsor that first episode with Milkshake.
Beautiful. And I did see the big post on Facebook today for R Squared and Milkshake. So I'm sure everyone was happy to hear Jay Peterman to start or John O'Hurley. I know I was thrilled when that came across, and I'm sure you were as well. So it leads us right into our topic this week. So what are we talking about?
Well, Jay Peterman, man, since he's kind of our intro guy right now. And honestly, we left off last week where my number one person was Larry David. And so there's kind of a theme here. You and I both fell in love with each other over our love of Seinfeld. And what better way to talk about top fives and do a little milkshake than to talk about our favorite show ever, Seinfeld.
Oh, it's a great show. And I know we're going to talk about our top 5 Seinfeld moments or scenes or lines or whatever it might be. We just have our top 5. But before we started, I kind of wanted to get your take, Jeff, and this is something that we haven't spoken about, but there's been a lot of bit characters, so to speak, on Seinfeld that come in for anywhere from 2 to 3 to 15 episodes. Do you have any favorites out there?
Yeah, it's an obvious one, but it's hard to not appreciate this guy, which is the soup Nazi. And I know that that's like a cliche one, and anybody who doesn't even know Seinfeld will talk about that. But that episode I love so much. I love everything about the soup Nazi, everything about his character. And, you know, he does, the actor actually does like tours and has a whole little soup set up in New York, which you can do it with the real Kramer. That the actual show Kramer was featured off of, the real Kramer. They do like this tour together and whatnot. But that would be mine. What about yours?
Well, you know, there's so many that are out there that did more than Soup Nazi was on a couple episodes, but you know, the continuing characters that weren't the main staff, right? You take out Kramer and obviously George and Elaine and Jerry, and then there's folks like Jay Peterman, of course, Putty, Newman, Frank Costanza, who was great, but you know, one of the ones that always made me laugh, just because he was so obnoxious, kind of like Johnny Cochran, Jackie Child. All the lawsuits and everything. It was just one of those characters that came back a few episodes, and you know, he was always trying to find some frivolous lawsuit, and he was working the system a lot like Johnny Cochran. But it was a funny character to me, so I enjoyed him. None of his stuff made my top 5 though, but I do think that his presence was pretty good. But I love the soup Nazi as well.
Well, no, and I love how they closed out the show. You know, there was a lot of heat over that finale, but the way they brought back all the characters, and your boy, you know, basically couldn't do his little thing with them, so they ended up getting locked up anyway. But it was such a great recap of all of these bit characters you're talking about and bringing them on, because that's really what made the show. I mean, really were these, because it was what they made fun of. It's literally everybody they were making fun of along the way or interacting with to create the fun that they were making fun of. So.
Yeah, they didn't care about anybody but themselves, and that was apparent in the last episode, and that's what made it great. But also, I think people wanted closure, and that really wasn't closure, sitting in a jail cell. But interestingly enough, it was I like the ending of it. It's not in my top 5 episodes, or top 5 moments, but it could be easily. But what I did when I went through my list, I immediately said, okay, Seinfeld, what did I like? What didn't I like? And a few scenes came to mind. Some will be recognizable, some may not, but they stuck with me over 20 years. And that's what my top 5 consist of.
Yeah. And so my top 5, I think some of them are going to be popular ones. We may have some, layovers here together or whatnot. But for me, what I did with it, and I do have some honorable mentions, but what I did with it is what were the first 5 that came to my mind when I thought the first 5 moments. And so that's what these are. We might have same stuff. I don't care. That might mean that these are the greatest moments at all. I didn't research. I didn't look up anything. I was like, what are the first 5 moments of this show? And then that's when I wrote them down and ranked them. And I have a couple honorable mentions. So,
well, you know how fast I did mine. So, I didn't do a lot of research on it. We were chatting this morning, and I think 15 minutes after you heard from John O'Hurley, you were like, hey, let's get an episode. And you picked a topic, and I went off for about 15 minutes before I cut the grass and wrote down the same thing, 5 things that stuck with me over 25 years. And that's what we're going to go over today. And let's mix it up a little bit this week. Let's start with your number 5 instead of me, or since you have honorable mentions.
Yes, let's do that.
I did not do it, but I'd love to hear what your honorable mentions are.
Okay. There's 3 of them, and they all kind of work together for me. And hopefully it's not taking any of your top 5 since they're my honorable mentions, but I'm not going to really speak on them. I'm just going to name what they are, and then you can dive in further with them if they're any of yours. But all 3 of them kind of correlate together to me, and that's the low talker, the close talker, and man hands. For whatever reason, those, like, literally I think about those all the time when I have a low talker around me, and I can't hear. I immediately start using that term, low talker. Or when you have someone in your face, close talking, as in that episode. And then man hands, that phrase pops in my head all the time. So.
And when she cracks that lobster with her hands, and I know it's not her hands, but that scene is just, it's pretty darn funny. So, I know which one is the low talker. I know the close talker. All those are great. I think, who was the close talker? That was the comedian, right?
It was.
Oh boy, what's his name? Judge Reinhold? Was it Judge Reinhold?
Yeah, I don't know his name, but it was the comedian, and he was the one that was always in his face. The low talker was Kramer's girlfriend.
Yep.
I believe it was. And then the man hands was, like you said, the lobster scene and everything. So she had man hands.
She did.
So that's it. Yeah, let's jump into your number 5 since I did that. So
all right. Well, it kind of plays off what you just said. The low talker, although that's not the part of the episode that really got me. The puffy shirt episode. There's a couple lines from that, and the low talker was in that, and obviously Seinfeld had to wear this goofy looking shirt, and Kramer said, this is going to be the new look of the 90s. You're going to be in like the first pirate. And Jerry whines back and he says, but I don't want to be a pirate, which was, to me, made me laugh. But also in that episode, he's wearing cowboy boots at one point, and somebody said, hey, you look like a cowboy. And Jerry, in his fashion, said, well, I don't want to be a cowboy. So those 2 lines from the puffy shirt episode crack me up. If it came on today, that's all I'd wait for, is I don't want to be a cowboy. I don't want to be a pirate. So classic scenes, classic lines. So that's my number 5.
Good. And that's it. It's all of them are classic. I'll be honest. I had such a hard time really picking and wanting to talk about, like, it was quick for me to pick the 5, but then I kept thinking of more. And then I kept thinking of each episode, because I love this show. I love everything about this show. I watch it over and over, and I don't like watching things over and over. And so I say these 5, but I'm hesitant to even say that this is my top 5. It may change tomorrow or next week if I watch a rerun and something else, sparks my memory again. But so this one, and this isn't even about, I'm reading a book called Seinfeldia, and This is someone who was more behind the scenes and talking about Larry David, Jerry Seinfeld, and the whole production and behind the scenes of everything going on with Seinfeld. It's a super interesting book. And I got this fact from this book, and I picked this earlier today, and then I went just to make sure that fact was real. But this episode that I'm about to speak of, it's the whole episode that I'm talking about is the Chinese restaurant. And the Chinese restaurant, to me, there was a lot of banter. There was a lot of good dialogue, but it was nothing else to the episode. Literally nothing else but them waiting in the Chinese restaurant and researching it. NBC executives wanted to pull it. They didn't want to run this. This was not normal. This was a live run through. Like literally, they just from start to finish, no stops, no anything else, just ran through this entire episode for this. Fast forward to now, it has basically been ranked as one of the best in sitcom history, just the way that they were doing it. Larry David was going to quit, to completely quit the whole series because NBC executives were like, we don't want that. There's literally nothing about that. We get your shows about nothing, but that's the worst idea for episode. This isn't going to work. We need something there. Kramer wasn't even in that episode. It's one of the 2 episodes he wasn't in. So it was like, and Larry David being Larry David was like, cool, I quit. If we don't run this episode, I quit. And the dude was a genius. He saw beforehand how this would transform TV, so to speak.
And that was definitely a top episode, not in my list because although I liked it a lot, it's not in the list, but I do love that one. And I love how the minute they walk out, the waiter yells or the front desk guy says, Seinfeld party of 3, right when they walk out. So classic episode, good stuff there for sure.
Yeah.
So number 4 for me, I'm going to jump into another character you mentioned earlier, and you may have it higher on your list, but the Soup Nazi episode. And when George is going down the line to get his soup, he's ordering his medium turkey chili. He looks in the bag. There's no bread. He wants his bread. Jerry's telling him to shut up, calm down, don't say a word. And eventually George asks for the bread. Soup Nazi gets upset and says, no soup for you. And that line, there's not a person in the world who doesn't know that line or doesn't use it in another fashion, like no pizza for you, no soup for you, but that's my number 4.
Well, and you're right. People who haven't even seen the show will say no soup for you.
Yep.
Like they know to say that for stuff. They don't know what it's about. But that's why he was one of my favorite big characters because he played that so well. I don't have it on my list. Good. So that's good. So far, we're good to go. This one might be on yours, maybe not. But again, these are the 5 that came to my mind. This is the big salad episode moment. And I love this. And we're speaking of food here because usually it's just random stuff that they just kind of coined a term around that became famous. But the premise of the episode, for anybody that doesn't know, at least this part of it, this scene, there's more of it that was happening. But is George buys Elaine a salad. She wants a salad. And he comes back with his girlfriend. The girlfriend takes credit for the salad when Elaine says thank you. George gets super, super frustrated by this. He has to tell Elaine about it. When they're in the cab later, he's telling her that he bought the salad. And Elaine tells his girlfriend, and then she breaks up with him over the big salad. But I've been in restaurants and stuff, and I've even said this, over and over, like when there's a big salad or a salad, I'll even ask them, is this the big salad? And nobody ever gets or understands what I'm saying because it's a corny dad joke. But I also just want to see if there's other Seinfeld people. But Larry David actually had that happen in real life and when he wrote about it. And he had done it on set with an editor of the show or something. He bought the salad. Jerry Seinfeld's assistant gave it to her, and she thanked Jerry Seinfeld's assistant instead of him. And of course, he probably went off about it and talked about how he bought the salad. So
it could have been a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode as well, because Larry David, he is George. George is Larry David. So I just love the characters on both shows. But he's a genius. I love it. Great choice. So, we're up to number 3 now. And this is where I've got 2 that are tied, but it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to go with the first one that I wrote down. And this is the one not starring, but has Keith Hernandez in it. And it's the spitting episode. Yeah. It kind of parallels the JFK assassination with the magic loogie.
The grassy knoll.
Yeah. And I love the date. The date is actually my birthday because in one of the lines on the show, Newman says June 14th, 1987, Mets versus Phillies. We're enjoying a beautiful afternoon. And he goes on, and then Kramer closes it out by saying our day was ruined. And it just goes on about the magic loogie and how it bounced off 4 different people and struck Kramer in the temple. And of course, they thought Keith Hernandez was just the devil man. So funny stuff. Keith Hernandez was in a few episodes, which I actually liked. Yes. He was in another one. I won't ruin it for you, but in case you brought it up, but did you have moving in there? Had the Keith Hernandez movie?
No, but I love that one.
and the funny thing about that, because he's asking for help from Jerry. Can you help him? The last person who needs help moving would be Keith Hernandez.
Exactly.
He made millions playing baseball. So just the whole premise of the show made me laugh that he's looking for help to move a couch. Anyway, but number 3 is Keith Hernandez, the magic loogie.
I don't want to jinx us, but I'm super excited so far that we don't have any overlap with this. I mean, I know there's tons of episodes, but these are, again, were the top that came to our mind. So, great episode, actually. That wasn't one of the first that came to my mind, but I love watching that one. Specifically the way that Newman and Kramer explain how it happened. Yeah. So for me, this would be my number 3, and it has to do with Woody Allen. And these pretzels are making me thirsty. And this episode to me is funny in a lot of ways. That moment, I'm really talking about that moment that the pretzels are making me thirsty. Right. But there's another flow going on in the show, a whole storyline where Jerry's car was stolen. And I love that part of it too, where he's kind of like, hey, he dials up his car phone. The guy that stole it answers it. And he's just real nonchalant. Like, hey, did you take my car? The guy's like, yeah, and Kramer asked for the golf clubs back in the back of it. And it's funny because then the guy calls him back afterwards and asks how to work the heat or something like that in the car or something like that. That it's just small things like that. But these pretzels are making me thirsty. Is another line that is from that show that people will say they have no idea what they're doing. And it was Kramer stumbled upon Woody Allen filming down the street. And then there was a whole chaos thing there with George moving cars in the episode that changed all that. But Kramer came in and they all started saying these pretzels are making me thirsty in different ways to show him how he should say that one line in a Woody Allen film. And backstory, just because I keep having backstories on Larry David, he worked with Woody Allen on 3 or 4 different films in the past and just kind of had experience. I don't know if there was a direct tie-in to that line specifically, but that line cracks me up for sure.
Well, a great episode, and it's not one of my top 2, so that's fantastic. Although I loved it because every time I eat pretzels, I say that line. And
I do too.
In fact, I think 3 months ago, I was eating, real salty pretzels, and I actually put on Facebook a picture of the pretzels, and I just wrote, these pretzels are making me thirsty. Immediately, you could tell who the Seinfeld fans are because they'd quote other lines and so forth. But that is a classic line that, like the magic loogie, it's out there, no soup for you, all of that. Yeah, so a great choice at number 3.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, so what? We're down to top 2, and I have a feeling one of these we may overlap on. So I'm going to go with the one that I think we're going to overlap on.
All right.
Because my number 1, there's a reason why I like the number 1 scene. It's not the greatest episode, but I love the whole setup of number 1. So number 2 is the contest.
I'm out of the contest.
Where they're all talking about masturbation, and they're making a
bet about it quietly. Like you just had to mute yourself while you were saying it on a microphone.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say it, right? But they're trying to set up odds because Elaine wants to be a part of it, and they're like, "No, you can't be a part of it because to a guy, masturbation is like shaving to a man, right? It's a daily routine." And Elaine comes back and says, "I shave my legs." And then Kramer immediately says, not every day. So there's this whole premise that guys do it every day, women don't. And of course, within the first 20 seconds of the episode, right after that, they cut the scene and Kramer comes walking in, plops down his $25 and says, I'm out. So he had already viewed somebody through his window and taking care of business. But the contest and the whole discussion over masturbation, which was kind of taboo at the time, number 2 on my list.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I purposely left that one out just in case you would take it, which I'm good. So we still are not overlapping, which is great. I'm really shocked because we talked about this right before we started recording this, that I thought we would on a lot of them. And we haven't yet. So who knows? Maybe we won't. We give everybody 10 really good moments or episodes all together. I don't know if you have this one or not. This term is now the term that it is because of this episode, and that's the episode for shrinkage. And shrinkage is, everybody knows what it is now. Before that, it wasn't a popular term until this episode happened. And so they're out at the Hamptons visiting some friend. One part storyline of this episode that's so funny is how they're making fun of this ugly baby on this part of the episode when they're all there. But long story short, George is there with a potential girlfriend, I guess, someone that he wants to sleep with. And she walks around topless in front of Kramer, Elaine, and Jerry. And Kramer tells George about it. So he wants to see her topless now that she's walked around topless in front of everybody else. He tries to go in her room while she's changing. She wasn't really naked at that time. So he leaves and acts like he was trying to do something else. She was trying to go see the baby, got confused in the house, walks in on the bathroom. George is getting out or undressing to get in the shower or whatever. And he says it's because of the pool that he has shrinkage. That that's not really how small his penis is to begin with. And the power of that statement has been used where that's a normal term and word. And granted, it may have been used a little bit before then, but it was that episode that really put it in popularity where it's everyday use now.
Oh, and I think it actually brought awareness to a lot of women who had no idea that was a struggle of guys, quite honestly. And I remember talking to some girls like, that's not real. I'm like, yes, it is. Just jump into cold water. In fact, just to circle back on the word shrinkage, I was actually just talking to a buddy of mine, Seth, and was talking about that episode and shrinkage. So ironically, that was 2 days ago. I talked about that episode.
But it's not on your list.
Nope.
Perfect. All right.
No.
Is it down to this one? Are we matching on this same one?
I hope not, because this is one, and it's just because of the way the whole story weaves together. They always have like the Elaine story going off. You have Kramer going off. You have Newman doing something, George doing something. This one tied it kind of all back together at the very end. And it came from the marine biologist episode. And, as George stated, the sea was angry that day, my friends. And he rambles on. It's a great line. He goes through the whole thing. And he finally climbs on. He's talking about it. He said, for there I was standing. I could see directly into the eye of this great fish. Jerry chimes in, mammal. George keeps going. Finally, he reaches into the blowhole and he pulls out a Titleist. The funny thing about that was earlier in the episode, Kramer was hitting golf balls from the beach into the ocean, not even thinking about the environment or the whales, and he plugged a whale, obviously. So the whole thing of George pretending to be a marine biologist for episodes and at different times, he actually had to go pull this golf ball out from the whale, and the whole thing really came together nicely. I thought it was hilarious. One of my favorite scenes in Seinfeld.
Yeah, I picture him. He was in the Monks, and he was doing that whole speech about that, and I remember it was such a great scene. I don't have it as on my list at all, so we did not touch on any of them, which is great. My number one is another, I think an obvious one for sure, is Festivus.
A Festivus
and
for the rest of us.
Yes, Festivus for the rest of us. And people, again, that haven't watched Seinfeld know what Festivus is and have heard of it, have seen shirts about it or information about it. And Festivus was actually a real thing, so to speak. The writer, I did this research because I was so curious on where this came from, out of Larry David's brain or whoever was writing or part of that. The writer, Dan O'Keefe, actually celebrated this. His dad created this back in 1966 in real life. And they took this and ran with it. And this is the same episode where George gets people to donate to the Human Fund.
The Human Fund, yeah.
As well. But, the Festivus is a celebration. George Costanza and his dad, the Costanzas he created for them or whatever. And they have the Festivus pole.
Yep.
One thing. They have the dinner, the Festivus dinner, the airing of grievances, the feats of strength. And then the Festivus miracles, which are like just generic things that are normal occurrences that turn into these Festivus miracles with it. So,
and that's another episode that I quote on Facebook quite often, actually, where I'm putting up my Festivus poll. just for shits and giggles, so to speak. But great episodes, all those that we mentioned today, classics. And I'm sure everyone who's listening to us tonight probably agrees or has seen all 10 of these episodes. They're just hilarious, funny, well written. And they come from the mind of a genius in terms of Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, for sure.
Yeah, they really do. That's one of the points that if you haven't watched Seinfeld, you've heard of it, you know what it is, you know who Jerry Seinfeld is, you've probably seen the B movie and recognize his voice, but if you haven't watched it, it's worth at least trying one episode and just seeing. It has changed the landscape of sitcom. It came at a time, even now, if it didn't exist then and it tried to come now, at a time where there has to be plot and drama and all this constant comedy and storylines, and this person moved in with the. Literally, the show is about nothing. Literally nothing, but it's about everything at the same time. It's about everyday occurrences and weird nuances and observations and things that we all think in our inner brain and are scared to either talk about. But it's what I love about it. It's awkwardness. And that's what life is. It represents real life. It truly does.
And that's Milkshake. It's exactly. A show about nothing and not intentionally going after the Seinfeld audience. It's just you and I babble on about every topic in the world. And so it's a show about nothing, and each episode's something different. So we have no direction either. We're just
what is direction? What is the point of direction? I mean, it worked for those guys, and they make fun of it in the show itself when they're pitching to NBC about a show about nothing as well. Yeah. And then Larry David takes it, and I love Jerry Seinfeld and everything he's done, and Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, and the stuff that he's done recently as well is still relevant. But Larry David with Curb Your Enthusiasm has taken it to a completely different notch. I feel like it is the Seinfeld on steroids, the Seinfeld he really wanted to create back in the day but couldn't, because it had to be censored and it had to be cleaner. It's just genius to think one person has created, and it's a multitude of people for sure, but out of one guy's brain and thought process, that there's all of these cliche statements, all of these things that we brought up in this episode, and there's more. There's so much more. You could do Seinfeld trivia night at a restaurant when we're out of COVID again, and you will literally not know all the answers because there's so much stuff out there that Larry David's done. Then he goes and does it with Curb Your Enthusiasm. I get passionate about the show. I love it. It makes me happy. I can watch it over and over. I try to find new things each time I watch it, just to see something else I may have missed. And it's super genius.
It is. Speaking of Superman's in every episode as well. So you just have to be on the lookout for Superman. Yes. Little things like that people just don't know. But I can tell you it's been a couple of years, but I used to watch all the reruns almost every night. It'd come on at 7. My wife finally got tired of me doing that. She's like, "Are you watching that again? You've seen every episode 100 times." It never got old to me, but I don't see it as much anymore. But all the shows, if I turn on one episode, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen within the first 5 seconds because it sticks with me. It's great.
Yeah, no, I agreed. So there we did it, Peterman. We didn't include you in any of our episodes, but we want to save that for the special time that we interview you.
Well, we know he's going to listen. He's going to be disappointed that he's not brought into this. However, we love the fact that he is a listener and he feels we're worthy of his endorsement. So I love that.
Yeah, no, thank you for your endorsement. We appreciate it. Tom, we appreciate your endorsement still, Tom Arnold. We'll bring you back at some point too. But we got to give it up for Peterman, especially for this episode and moving forward. And honestly, he just sounds better, truly. So
he has a beautiful voice.
Casey Kasem. Anyway, this is our episode this week. Seinfeld, we took it to a completely different route. So who knows, next week we'll talk about
nothing.
That's the premise here. Nothing.
The show about nothing, part 2.
All right, so we're out of here. It has been great. Thank all of you. I don't know how many it is these days. Actually, I think we have more listeners than I always give us credit for, but thank you guys for listening. It's been fun.
Love it.